Gideon? What would you do?
Well, I hate to be boring, but I think I'd do exactly the same thing. I mean, I'm just not into it. Yeah, I would, and I'm not super bullish about that kind of stuff over the long term, so I would sell it pretty quickly. Um, but actually, my son is really into this, and he built an app for tracking, identifying early promising NFTs in the Solana ecosystem, and so he's really into this stuff. But that's just not my thing.
That's what you tweeted a few months ago, right? That's a project you
Yeah,
tweeted.
that's right. Yeah. Good
And
memory.
how is that going? Has he had any traction?
Yeah, actually, he is. He's working with some friends now and very related. Um, it's what's the shortest way to describe this? They're basically doing fractionalized ownership of NFTs in the Solana ecosystem, and so that's what he's working on now.
Nice. Welcome, Genesi. We are doing more or less of a hangout today, and we are passing the word on if you were airdropped and a Bored Ape, the NFT project, what would you do with that? So, Gideon, will you pass it on to someone?
Sure, I'm going to pass it on to Enti.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I would probably do something similar. I find like we are probably too early, particularly on the NFT space, to know what's going to stay for the long term. Um, I think they don't really look that good, so I don't. That wouldn't be a reason to keep them. I would probably just keep Bored Ape if I saw any opportunity on the community or something, like if I like the community, but if not, I would sell it right away. And yeah, I think I'll pass the word to Benz.
Yeah, I'd probably sell it and reinvest. I actually there is one Bored Ape derivative that I really, really like that I might keep, but that's about it. And it's the Pop. Have you ever heard of Pop Wonder? He's like a kind of psychedelic artist, but it's like the ape, and then with like it's hard to describe. I might just put a picture of it, but I think it like really is a really good kind of capture of like crypto culture, because it's like silly ape stuff up front, but then like this deeper kind of philosophical and then like regenerative kind of theme to it. So, but I would sell it if it was anything else.
Share it on the lounge channel so we can see the what you're talking
I'll put it in there.
about. Yeah, I remember there is this friend of mine who he's the auditor of kind of the contracts of Grave projects. So he audits all the projects, and it seems to be that he's one of these kind of guys who are unique in the world and unique to his tasks and his capacities. And he has been in a lot of projects auditing and so on because he's a cybersecurity expert. And he also invests on things at the very beginning. He buys a lot of stuff and he doesn't care, and he just keeps buying. And I remember once he arrived to my office. We used to work together. He arrived to my office and he was like, "Hey, I put up this crypto project I bought when it cost $20, and then I went to sleep and I put it to sale for 8 ether. That at the moment 8 ether was about 8K, more or less." And he was like, "I'm not gonna. I mean, I already have a huge profit if I sell it for 8K." And then when he woke up, he had sold it for 80K, 80 ETH. And with that, he bought a house. He bought a house. and he immediately translated it into something. He always dreamed with a house in the beach, so he bought a house in the beach in Barcelona, and it was a crypto punk, whatever punks, the one that are punks, and he bought it overnight. Like, he put it to sale at 8 p.m. and he woke up and it was already sold. So for me,
Wow.
that's the marvelous capacities that it has, is to be able to transform someone's life into something positive, rather than this crypto bro kind of culture that is a little bit toxic and misogynistic. So I'm not very much fan of that layer of the crypto world. And I pass it on to you, Janacy.
Hello, I'm sorry I arrived late, but I think the question is the one that I'm seeing in the screen. Actually, I'm not sure. I think I'm still new by with everything in Web3 and airdrops and so on. So I don't know, maybe I would sell it. Why not? I don't know. Either I'll sell it or keep it, but actually I'm not seeing the value because I don't know what actually they why I don't know what's that. So I'm ignorant. But thank you for
No problem. Thank you for engaging. So yeah, so it seems that we are value aligned here. The fifth of us. Give me a second. The fifth of us seems to be value aligned, so that's nice. So today the agenda is quite short. I wanna It seems it all comes together, but this is a follow-up to one of the questions. This comes from an action item that you, Gideon, sort of push without knowing, which is basically, what do we do with the data from the community, the one that we got from Discord. And we met last week with Benz and Genesi, since they like data scientists and data analysis. And I share with them the data that we had our Discord and the data that we have in our forum, in order for them to see if what we can do with this data, basically. And I feel, and I don't know how you feel about this, Gideon, but I felt that we are on this process of like matching things together. And I feel like, for example, this community data also helps to the onboarding process and the follow-up user journey that will follow up the onboarding. And I feel like these pieces are sort of very close to come to fruition, but we still don't find a way to match them. But I still I visualize these components sort of being there and being very close to be cohesive. But I want to ask you, Benz or Janacy, if you want to share something, if you have done any update, just in the light of the meeting. I'll pass it on to Benz.
Yeah, so we met, I forget when we met, Friday? Friday. And we just kind of talked about the kind of like the top variables or like metrics, specifically for onboarding, and like kind of the sources we'd want for them, or like if there's any crosswalks we need to do. And a couple of those things were like using like praise to see new members within like this month that had both given or received praise. And the praise piece of that seems pretty easy. The Discord part of it, I'm still not sure. It seems like we have access to kind of like Discord's default like analytics, but we might not have access to that underlying like user data, at least in like a database form that we could link pretty easily with praise. So that was kind of one thing that we thought of, and just to check if there is somewhere else that we can get that information without like manually tracking it, because that would be ideal.
So I crashed the reward system working group sync last week to ask this question, and they answered that yes, it can be tracked. They actually is one of the things that they are putting on. So what we can do, that Griff is the expert on a spreadsheet, which I am not. He the way that for example, I will share my screen because it will be easier to explain how this works. But the way that our praise quantification sheets worked is the data was pulled out from one place to the other one. So what we can do is to just add the code to get the information from the praise spreadsheet, and you basically identify the users and just put them on the spreadsheet that we are requiring. So it keep automatically updating data from users. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess like that's pulling praise, right? The praise data, but the one thing I don't know about, and it's probably just that I don't know where it is like the people who enter Discord or like join Discord and their like user ID to link it to the praise, or is that like captured in the praise database somewhere else already?
But you mean when someone enters the Discord?
Yeah, because to do like we need to know like exactly, we need to have both the praise and when they entered so that we can see like new users, right?
Right. So we do have a tag called new member, and that applies to everyone who is new. So
Okay.
that's a way to track them. That's not a public data. You have to go manually to, like, this is an example of a spreadsheet that it's chaotic, but just to give you an example of these all are formulas that Grave manually pull out. So basically you can see you can get the user linked, and there's a formula for the user linked to a database that updates automatically. So we could do something very similar for pulling out the data from the praise across the profile of someone, to provide context. Going back to the topic of what you just mentioned, there is something we could actually do and could be a really interesting cultural practice, which is to praise every user, as automatically set a bot to praise new users automatically as they join. So if we can set up a bot that can automatically praise someone as they join, it will automatically go identify when someone logs in, that goes to our database, and then we can just then automatically link that username to the praise database and see if that user provides or receive praise. Does that make sense?
Science, but that leaves like a hole in that member person journey into the token engineer company. I mean, okay, you will be able to see when that person arrives because you are seeing that phrase. But let's see what happens if that person is not engaging so much and it's not receiving praise. How you can track what's happening there in their journey, that you can, help that person to contribute or to be more engaging with the species.
May I ask, just for context, like, what's the intention of the data that you're trying to pull?
Actually,
Yeah.
that's the thing. The first thing we talk about in our meeting, I told them, hey, we have to select the metrics that we consider are the most important ones in terms of tracking or tracking, checking the member's journey. Those will be the main ones, and then we can maybe in the future see if we need more or not, if we include another metrics or not to the list.
The two things. The first is, I think the praise is a very good narrative to build upon a journey, because in theory, the more you get engaged with the community, the more praise you give or you receive. So it's an interesting metric to sort of explore as a narrative for the user in the TEC. But we need to take in consideration the fact that how do we make it a cultural practice that they do as they entered, because not everyone goes through orientation call. So it could be this, like a praise as they join, and an immediate response, automatic response, like, hey, you're at a new journey, you have been praised. If you wanna become a praiser, go to this or do this or whatever. So this is something we need to think about. And then how do we sort of make this a practice that gets incorporated into the organization in a way that it helps people to stay in our journey, let's say. And the reason we need this information, Inti, answering your question, sorry, it's to create a onboarding process or a user journey process that is based on data and is based on actions that can sort of reinforce, improved, or yeah, improve the system that we have right now. Because right now we are a little bit blindless, sort of doing actions. Our actions are based on intuition, and we have enough data from the past. We started the onboarding process on September, just to provide context, Inti. We started the onboarding process. We have it now in September, and it has passed 6 months. That is the time that I gave it to the process to be evolved and improved. So this data, it's the only point of reference that we have to sort of improve this process. And the onboarding process is part of the user journey process. It's just that we haven't developed the entire user journey yet. So I want this to be part of that. Yes, Inti.
Okay. Oh, well, yeah. Go ahead, Gideon.
Oh, go ahead. This relates to some of the stuff I'm going to talk about later, so I'll hold off. Go ahead, Inti.
Okay. Well, just some observations. Um, well, first of all, I think that's pretty smart that you guys are trying to use data to make decisions. But I was in one reward system call, and as far as I know, seems like your guys are trying also to implement source grid. So probably, I think probably you may want to keep the discussions about that, on a low profile, because source grid also serve as a really nice input of data, and it can also mature the process of onboarding and engaging the community, because it relates on reactions, which are far more natural than typing praise, whoever. um, they also have an explorer, and you can see the amount of credit in time. And I'm not really sure, but I think you can also see the amount of praise per plugin, which Discord is a plugin, the forum is a plugin, GitHub is a plugin, and so you can say, okay, uh, Edu received 30 credit in 3 months from Discord alone, and this means that and that, and probably there's a way to then just pair that with praise, and you get, well, even more data from that.
Yeah, I think I will join the next reward system call to
Cause,
have more
'cause-
information.
yeah,
Uh, but yeah, I
because
think
also, uh, oh, sorry. Well, just to
go ahead.
finish, also, I think you are also trying to use the pollen bot of OneHive to onboard users into the source grid instance. And so that could be also a nice way to get data, because the bot makes a list that includes your Discord ID, your forum username, your GitHub handle, etc., your Ethereum address. And so you can pair praise with the source code data and then just pulling the data, you may end up with an easier and more complete set of data to work on.
Yeah. Go ahead, Gideon.
Well, I think well, there are a bunch of comments I'd like to make, but what my understanding of the difference between the source cred and the praise is, source cred is aimed at more kind of generic, objective types of feedback, right? That can be more systematically tracked, versus praise is more qualitative. And this, and I don't know in practice like where that line is, but let's just say that conceptually that's accurate and that is what we're going to continue to try to do. Keep the source cred for more programmatically tracked, automated, let's say automated tracking, versus praise is more qualitative, people based. And this kind of maps to some of the user journey work that I've been working on over this last week. And I'll just touch on this piece of it, which is that I think that part of what we are going to need to be thinking about as a community is that there's kind of like two levels of engagement and development that we're working on. One is a kind of like cross community engagement, right? Which is people come in to TEC and we need to meet them where they're at and give them some simple ways to get involved. And that's going to be probably a fair number of people over time. But then there's a second developmental or kind of like engagement process that's much more focused on the working groups, right? So the first one is about building a sense of community and pulling people into that sense of identity, that kind of community identity and a kind of relational way of being with each other. And there are probably some things that we'll be able to track that are directly related to that. And my guess is that source cred will probably be a pretty good source of a lot of that data, but there'll be others too. And then over time, I think what we're going to find is that the Communitas, part of our work is going to be serving as a bridge between that kind of generic community engagement and then handing people off to like a working group guide who will then bring them into a similar engagement process for the working group. And that's where the work gets more qualitative, right? It's going to be more specific. It's going to be more specialized, and probably harder for us to track with things like source cred. So I'll just stop there, and I can come back later and talk about where things are at with the user journey.
Yes, Vance, would you like to say something?
I had something a ways back just about like praise when they come when they first hit the server. One thing would be like we'd want to make sure that wasn't gameable so that they could just leave and like come back. Although I don't know how even praise now translates to tokens or if that's just your C stack at this point, but we'd still want to make that like not gameable. And if we were to do that, like we would just like whatever the metric was, if they only received that praise, we could pull those people out so that metric was still meaningful. That was my comment from back a little ways, but
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. It could be really like it can exploit. You can just gamify entering, coming back and forth from that. So yeah, there should be certain levels of boundaries. Welcome Manu to the working group sync. We're talking about the community data that is available on Discord and that Benz and Genesi are sort of working on to see what actions can we do. And one of the things that came out of this discussion is that praise is a very interesting metric that we are not actually taking in consideration just for the reward system at the moment. The idea eventually, if I'm not wrong, and if you have been in these calls, you could correct me, which is basically that source credit and praise will fusion together and they will work in the same dashboard. Some things will change, like the way you praise and the things that you can be, yeah, that you can praise. For example, attending calls is no longer a reason to be praised, but there are these things get fusion on the dashboard that Christopher and the reward system group are building, and that's my understanding of how it will work. So it will fusion qualitative and quantitative. Therefore, it could be really interesting for us to consider praise as something more than a reward, but also as a cultural practice that can shape metrically and non-metrically our community. And if we sort of incorporate that in our onboarding as well as the user journey experience, it could be really interesting. For example, the possibilities of a user that has not been active in the past, gracias, in the past week or the past month, then we can just, praise him in a way like, let's say, 5 praises in consecutive to, praise him for his past work in order to make him maybe return or, you know awake his feeling of belonging, because there is a wide range of possibilities on this, using the praise in a way that is not only metrically or for reward, but also metrically for the user journey. I think that's a right metric to track. Yes, get it.
One thing building on that, my personal experience is actually I love looking at the praise channel, just reading it, because it really, probably better than anything else in this whole, like any of our websites or anything, it gives you a feel for the culture of this organization. And actually, Manu, a lot of that is you. Like you are awesome as a praiser. It's really like you can just feel it, right? So like I think that one of the things that would be interesting to play with as like a way of onboarding people, just to give them a sense for the culture, is to just like, one of the goals is like you spend an hour over the course of a couple weeks just coming back and reviewing the praise channel, right? Just reading it for, spend like 10 minutes at a stint or something like that. Because I really think that by reading that channel, you start to pick up on the vibe of what makes this place special.
Yes, and I think there are ways around that too. Like, for example, sending people, like, or reading or sharing the screen on onboarding about the praise, and like if you click on an emoji specifically for that channel, you get praise back, or some there are mechanics that can work around how someone uh, react to the praise and is accountable. Pick your top favorite praise of the week or something like that. That's what I'm saying. Like, there is a narrative on the praise that is unexplored for us, and I think it could be really important for us, and help on designing a user journey that represents accordingly the culture that we want to achieve. So yeah, is there something else you would like to say, Janacy or Benz, regarding this community data?
Yes. I was worrying about the fact that maybe, I mean, there's something that could happen, but I don't know if it could be possible, but I don't know. I'm just going to say the idea. But what about if by measuring this kind of things, and mostly if we are going to use the praise data, I'm not sure if that could incentivize, like, the word I use, then like being in a competence or something like that, like to compete for, or feel that pressure to be there praising or contributing, or I don't know if I'm message have My idea is a little bit.
Yeah, and in the context of what we talked about last week, like we were talking about going beyond possibly like just percentages of like new users being praised or receiving praise as like a metric for new user engagement. And then we kind of were like playing with like classifying like ranges of praise, so you could kind of like see the distribution of praise for those new members. And then that's when we were talking about like, well, maybe that would set things up so that if there's too much emphasis on like the quantity of praise, then we're just like setting it up to be like kind of a competition thing.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
good point. I think not making it a competition, it's something that it's it will be part of the boundaries. If like you cannot praise this and that, like when we see what the reward system came out with their boundaries regarding what will be praised and what will not count as praise, it could be one of the things that it could be helpful to know also, as a point of reference and avoiding gamification. And we will see it. And let's for me, this is not taking a risk, but we are blindly creating this, and there will be gaps where we will fail, and we will just take it back. If we see that the first 2 weeks people are over gamification or over gamifying this process, we just take it back, and it's fine. But this is a trial and error kind of exercise for us at the moment, and that's what is important for me. NTS.
One thing I mentioned on the Stewards call was precisely about gaming and on competition of that. Um, and I think it's important that uh, we we take in mind that the more um, the more natural or the less permissions you need to interact with a reward system, we are going to need more moderation. It's like moderation and more clear boundaries as to how like um reactions. I'm talking about source code. 'Cause I don't really know much about praise, but maybe some of the same stuff applies. But reactions are sometimes a bit hard to measure. Like I may post I may post something, and like why would you not be able to react to that, for example? And so people are like, we are really intelligent when we want to achieve something, and so the moment we see a breach on the boundaries of a reward system, we are it's like 100% likely that people will show up, and you are going to see masses of people coming up until that boundary is set up. That's, I guess, for gamification. We're going to need more moderation around. And for competence, I think it goes down more to culture, to the community culture, than to anything else. Because uh, I guess it's all about opportunities on a particular community. In this case, TEC. And in the moment, you we see like a difference between the ratio of opportunities and rewards. We're going to see like a bump on competence, because then you have a lot of resources going out from the rewards, but not a lot of opportunities to contribute, and or not a lot of rules to how to contribute. How do I introduce myself? Like I I I don't know. I have some experience in DAO, so I may know how to introduce myself. I may know like sort of the politeness of contributing in a DAO. But if I'm new to the space, for example, like how do I make sure I'm in the right path to contribute while not being too hard on the competition, and like it's just a weird transition, I think. And SourceGrid is beautiful. I like it a lot, but it doesn't know how to account for that kind of things.
Nice. So do you want to make a seamlessly, effortlessly pass to the user journey work that you have been doing, Gideon, so we can talk about it?
Yeah. So last week I just really started digging into the user journey. I'm not even sure I would describe it as a user journey. Um, it's I mean it is that, but it's also kind of like a narrative. It's like, how do we think about the work of Communitas in kind of the biggest picture? That's what I was trying to capture. What is it that this working group is really doing? And so that's what I'm trying to capture. I'm hoping to have this document to a point where I can get it out to folks in the next, by the end of this week. Maybe sooner, but hopefully by the end of this week. The basic structure I touched on just at the outset, but I'm kind of breaking it out into Communitas kind of having two primary roles. One is the role of onboarding newcomers and helping them to be connected with the community and to have like a strong sense of identity and to contribute to TEC at a community level over time. So that's like the first job that I'm focusing on in this document, is what does that look like? And that's been a lot of what we've focused on so far as a working group, is that. And then there's a second section which kind of touches on some of the stuff that Nate was talking about before, which is participation, which is where a lot of the work actually gets done in this DAO is in the working groups. And so how do we become a lot more focused on helping to move people from kind of the generic, the community as a whole, as a big container, into specific working groups based on what their interests are and what their skills are, and their passion, really. So you've got this document up, the one that Durgadas pulled together.
Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah. Go ahead and I answer that.
Yeah. So one of the challenges that I've got right now, and that's kind of where I'm at this stage, is I wanted to try to capture some of the stuff that has been floating around for a while in my own head, and that's what I did last week. And now over the next couple of days, what I'm going to do is go back to all these, to the this document, but also the LBS document, the stuff that MS was pulling together, and start to layer that stuff on. But not do it in a way where it's like trying to like intentionally just put everything together. I want to try to synthesize it in a way that makes sense for, like where it's like a whole, right? And so I would say that that's where I'm at in this process, and I'm trying to get this done as quickly as possible, because I don't want to just be working on this on my own. I want to like get it to a point where it's ready for some feedback and just start iterating with folks. So that's kind of like, I would say that would be, that's what I'm hoping is by the end of this week.
I mean, you are trying to tame the beast. So
what's that?
You are trying to tame the beast. So,
yeah.
I commend you for that. The thing on my screen, for folks and context, it's one of the first iterations that was done about the journey for a user on here. There have been different iterations of this process, but there was something. If this serves as a feedback, Gideon, there was something that Durgaras mentioned. I don't know if in this call or in others, but he mentioned the capacity for this to be a narrative by itself, the narrative of someone who who is new, the narrative of someone who wants to participate, the narrative of someone who wants to be an advocate for talking, like thinking. And he told me, like, why don't you do orientation calls that are based on these narratives? And then I thought, following his pattern, following his chain of thoughts, I thought, wow, it could be really interesting to, if I can explain in orientation call the path that you can take to become a full-fledged user of the TEC or contributor or whatever you want to be in the TEC, then if we reach that point of easy explainable and doable, with the action items corresponding for these actions to be followed, then we will have a user journey complete and a narrative built around that, or the possibility to build our narrative around it, if we have clear path or clear intentions of path that can be followed for the user. And for me, I think it's, if we manage to achieve this level of awareness, like, what do we want the users to be aware of existence? What do we want users to know about specifically? We have very clarified this in the guide. In the guide, there are the things that we want them to know. How do we, level up our level of awareness attached to an understandable path to follow or a journey to follow? And just briefly passing to you, Manu, I want to welcome Harsh and Guyan to the Communitas Working Group. We are discussing right now the process of building a user journey and a narrative that goes along that user journey for everyone who joins the TEC and for everyone who is in the TEC. And these are one of the draft for potential user journeys, just to provide you context. And Manu, would you like to say something?
Yeah, from applying to another DAO that's barely starting called RN DAO by Daniel Ospina. He's the one sort of like a thought leader in the space, and he's starting this research and development DAO called RN DAO. And he did a really good job of doing like a skills mapping. So if I assume you're looking at my screen now, and I really like the way he divided or compartmentalized all the different like skills, and the graphic designer in green, and then the business ones in purple, governance and decision making in yellow, economics and finance in blue, and then sort of like event management, hosting purple, then law is in light blue, marketing in sort of like red or pink, and then sales and strategic partnerships yellow, UX and data science in blue, and then writer, and then another one. So I don't know. I really like it. It feels like all encompassing. I don't know if the our current skills mapping is as good as this. I just thought this was very nuanced, and hey, if we can copy it, if we can emulate it, then maybe it would add to the whole process.
Will you share this link in the Communitas text channel for everyone to? I think that's one of the narratives that are a possibility. If someone wants to be, if that's a narrative that can be constructed for the contributor, for example,
Yeah.
But if you want to be a partner with the TEC, the narrative doesn't work with you. So it's very interesting to, exactly as you mentioned, Manu, to build up this narrative and to understand what do we need to fulfill this narrative to make them, effective. Just kidding.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think it will be helpful to take that and then map it into our working groups too, right? And then look for where there's holes, right? Where we don't really have a working group that contains some of those things, right? So I think it's great. I mean, I guess one thing I'll throw out is in terms of a narrative, a meta narrative for TEC. As we're thinking about how we promote the field of token engineering, the thing that keeps coming back to me over and over again is that the best way for us to do that is through people, is by, in a way, there's this idea of a deliberately developmental organization. And what that means is it's an organization that, as part of its core mission, is focused on developing people, right? Helping them to grow. And that means growing professionally, in the mission, but also personally, interpersonally, like, their capacity as an individual, as a person who can show up and just be, open-hearted and, smart and knows how to connect with people and work with people. Like, those kinds of skills are things that as a community we benefit from over the long term. So part of what I'm trying to describe here is how do we as a community welcome people in and then help them to grow. And some of those things that they'll be growing on are community-wide, like values, like our mission, our values, and our vision. It's like really helping them to embrace that and just feel like a strong sense of identity around that. And that's like the community container. How do we pull them in and help them to continue to develop that aspect? And then in addition to that, there are these more focused, I would say, like specialized skill sets that are closer to what you're talking about, Manu, with that list. It's like these are specific skills, and we actually also need people to grow on those as well. And not just in the abstract. It's like, how does marketing relate to a community? How does it relate to a token engineering commons that is also a community? So that's kind of from a narrative perspective. If we think of ourselves as, yes, we have this mission, but like one of the ways that we do it is by developing people.
I think there is in that question, Gideon, there is something really important, and I so far until now have thought it in a top to bottom rather than bottom to top approach. So the narrative that I was building on my mind was like, hey, let's create roles and let's assign them names of famous engineers that are very related to innovation, and then let's make a journey regarding engineering, or a journey regarding when this working group was created. We thought about names related to the universe, because we thought that the branding was really related to this punk sci-fi science galaxy kind of approach, and then we came down to this name that has nothing to do with the universe, because it was more related to the community. And now that you mentioned this, for me, I just had this kind of a vision of thinking of how your journey in the TEC should be the one that you follow to become a token engineer. How do I become a token engineer? If we think the token engineer as a holistic thing that incorporates culture, that incorporates economy, that incorporates technology, that incorporates developers and so on, how do we make someone to be, so you have, in order to go through that, you have to go through different layers. You have to go through a cultural layer, a social layer, and we all have all these things here. So the narrative of how do I become a token engineer is something we can solve here, and it could be a really interesting user journey narrative to follow in my mind at this moment. But it's just an idea that just came out to me. So yeah, that's it. Does anyone else? I will open the floor because we're having monopolized in this conversation. Does anyone else have something else to say? I will count down to 0, and then you can mute yourself, and I pass the word to you. Guyan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I've been seeing these similar issues coming up in other DAOs I'm involved with of, the user journey, onboarding a narrative is really huge. And, it's like you arrive at a website and it's like, we're involved in this egalitarian process. Come get involved, join our Discord. And then people enter the Discord and then they're like, what the hell is going on? It's just all of these different, chronological unfoldings of people talking to each other. I don't really know how to orient, where to go from here, etc. So definitely the need for something that is more akin to a discourse type group or Notion or Clarity or on a website where it is just sort of arranged in a real clear sense of something that has more you know more temporally static, where it's easy to orient on things, I think is really important. So that's a big piece that I'm seeing. I think the notion of like the onboarding journey, that it would be potentially different for every working group, I think is a useful way to consider it. But then also the notion of a narrative overall for just someone getting involved of what does it mean to be a token engineer as well. And Gideon, something I'm hearing you speak to is this notion of developing people, which I think is so important. Self-actualization. It's sort of like the, you know, Web3 resume, you could say as well. And so the other component for me around that is then tracking. It's like, okay, well, what are the values within the organization that are important? And how do you collectively decide what that measuring stick is of what's important? Or even are you giving people the autonomy to say on their own profile, here's what I'm thinking is important, so that's what I'm going to highlight. And then for that matter, how is that transferable between DAOs? Because that becomes an increasingly important question as well.
Yes, Santi.
I want to add as well that with what you guys said, um I think that uh, the TC is maybe at an interesting point where a lot of stuff can sort of take place. I feel like, for example, at this point in time, the TC is sort of getting itself together, because right now it seems like everything's much more focused on I guess setting up TC properly, working groups and how do we set the initial structure of the TC. And then I find really interesting the concept of building token engineers in the TC, because like for example at the current state, the TC is not in. I think the TC is not in the position where we can take someone with I guess small experience in crypto or whatever, and build them into a token engineer. And so um, I guess the question for the user journey, assuming that's kind of the end goal to build more token engineers, is like, okay, what kind of work do we need in order to build token engineers? Because we have some there are some working groups that are, well, you know there are some details that still need to be figured, but the working groups are pretty much already rolling and working. And while all of them sort of bring something to the table, um, what's like the product or the goal for a member? Like for example, I'm here, I'm contributing, I sort of get the TEC thing, but I'm not really sure. For example, what's the end goal of TEC? What am I supposed like? I'm trying to get involved in stuff. I really like pretty much everything I've heard, but I'm still not sure. Like in 5 years, what would the expected outcome of TCB?
Right.
Um, and of course, we don't have to be tied to just one outcome, but at least a set of possible outcomes to work towards. And so that way we can build stuff towards that goal, and we can onboard people towards that goal. For example, I
Right.
think that seeing the future, conceptualizing the future, I think it's a nice way to 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 make and the whole process or processes for the community.
Thank you, Nt. Yes, yes, I changed my narrative. It's not about how do I become a token engineer. It's how do I do token engineering, or how do I, yeah, it's about token engineering. And there's a human aspect to it that it needs to be, well, yeah. There's something interesting. Gideon, I would love to, whenever you finish this process, to sync with Durgara, so you can sort of match those points. And if during this week you still have bandwidth, we can sync on this and do a checkout before next call probably. And then Benz and Janae say, yes, let's see what we can do from here on. I will do my research with the price and get back at you guys to see what we can do about it. And I want to thank you all. I thought this was going to be a very short meeting because no one was going to show up, and it became quite the opposite. So thank you so much for joining and engaging today. It has been a pleasure, and looking forward to see you all next Monday. And if you need anything, my name is Logan. Take care, everyone.
Same.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.